The Rebel Capitalist Show.
You've gotten into macro with your most recent book. I mean, that's something I wanted to start with because we were at dinner the other night with our good friend Ken McElroy and Mike Dillard, and you brought us all a copy of this book that you've got with you right now. It's the Communist Manifesto. And we were talking the other day about how this has made a lot of predictions that we're seeing come to fruition now. I think Marx got the predictions right, but he got the solutions wrong. Way wrong.
It's unbelievable. This book came out, Communist Manifesto came out in 1848, so 160 years, whatever it is. I'm not good at math. But in 1965, I left Hawaii, and I went to school in New York, military school, and I didn't go to Snowflake University. You know, I mean, the first thing they do is they start yelling at you, screaming at you. First word is mission. What is the mission? Everything is mission-driven. And I went, holy mackerel. And then my instructor to study economics, he had us read the Communist Manifesto, Mein Kampf, Mao's little book, and other things. So we understood who the enemy was. Right. And so when I went to traditional business school for my MBA, which I never finished, they studied U.S. economics.
Right.
But we don't know what Marx economics is. Mm-hmm. And the thing that's frightening about this book, I mean, Sarah and I we just typed it out. Many of his predictions, he said, are coming true today.
Right.
Today. So that was in 1848. So this book was really, really prescient. And capitalism's in serious trouble.
Yeah, what are some of the predictions that you see coming true?
Well, a big one was this here. Who stole my pension?
Yeah, right.
Let me give you a little history. So in 65, I go to Kings Point for school. And in 66, they sent me to Vietnam because our school sent us out to sea. And I go to Vietnam for the first time, and I started to see this book coming true. You know, it's one thing to read about something, but when you go to a war zone, which I did in 66, on board a bomb carrier, we were carrying 750, 500, and 1,000-pound bombs to Cam Ranh Bay in Vietnam, I started to see this book coming true.
Yeah, right.
So I come back to school, and I talked to my English teacher, and you know, there's teachers you love and teachers you hate. And my English teacher was a guy who went to West Point, flew the B-17 in World War II, got shot down twice, captured once. Then I went back to Harvard, got his PhD, became an English teacher, PhD. He was teaching at Texas Women's College, which is all-female school. And he comes to Kings Point, and we're all male, you know, all young boys, 18 years old to 22. And so the guys asked him, I said, why did you leave Texas Women's College? He says, the young girls were screwing me too much. Here we are, 18-year-old guys going, our brains fried on the spot. You're getting late too much. He goes,
reminds me of seeing a Beavis and Butthead, right?
So I'm going, holy mackerel. So anyway, that's how it started. I respected the guy, and he talked about what it was like to fly the B-17 and bomb, you know. And this was before the P-51 fighter escort. So they were going naked into Germany. And that's why they got shot down so much. Kim's father was a B-17 pilot also.
Yeah.
It's interesting, that generation. So then the Israeli war broke out, 67, and Israelis toasted the Egyptians' Air Force, just wiped them out the 6-day war. I went, holy mackerel, they're having fun out there, you know. So 67, I'm now 20 years old.
Yeah, right.
And then I go back to school. I got the high-paying job with Standard Oil, just like my father wanted. I was like third mate for Standard Oil. I'm sitting at sea, and I keep thinking about my English teacher. And so I go back to the academy, and I said, tell me more about what it was like to fly in combat. And he says, best decision he ever made in his whole life. He said, I would do it again. Even if I lost my life, I would do it again. And then the war, Vietnam, because I was draft exempt, because I was called non-defense vital industry, oil. As long as you drove oil tankers, they couldn't draft you. So I'm making all this money as a 24-year-old kid. And that English teacher got to me. The 67 war got to me. So not being the brightest guy in class, I joined the Marine Corps. And in 72, I'm in Vietnam. And I'm seeing the war again. And everything this guy was writing about was coming true. But it's coming true today.
Yeah. Everything Marx was writing about was coming true back then.
1848.
Yeah, but you see it really coming true today, right?
And this is the big one, okay? Who's told my pension? What Marx says, the problem with capitalism, it leaves the bottom half poor. So you could be what he called middle class in capitalism in America, but capitalism will ultimately push you down into poverty.
Right.
And so in 74, I come back from Vietnam, ERISA comes out. ERISA is the 401k today. Now, you and I know what happens when that market crash was just coming.
Yeah, yeah.
The boomers, my generation, are toast.
Yeah, the middle class gets wiped out.
Yeah, because we're so dependent on this thing called a 401k, which is a defined contribution pension plan. In other words, the defined contribution means if you put in $1 million, hopefully get $1 million back. But the old pension plan was called a defined benefit. So if you worked for Ford Motor Company and they promised you $1,000 a month, Ford guaranteed the $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
But a defined contribution, Wall Street, as long as Wall Street stayed up, it was a good deal. So the reason we wrote this book here is my classmates who flew for United Airlines and all that, they lost their pensions. PBGC, Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporations, they took their pensions. So as you and the reason we always get together, and we're talking with Jeff Snyder and all this, he was talking about the Eurodollar crisis and how they're pumping up the stock market right now. My prediction is my generation, who are affluent today, will be in poverty in 10 years.
Yeah, and I think I'd take it a step further because I think it's not just your generation, but it's American society because now our economy is completely dependent upon the asset prices or the assets that are in the 401k.
Yes.
So if the 401k crashes as a result of assets, that means the entire economy crashes, and that goes back to what Marx is saying, and that's how those two books really dovetail on one another.
And there's one more thing that Marx was talking, so his complaint, which is accurate, that capitalism will turn the bottom half into poverty. He writes about how capitalism screws employees. He talks about how doctors and lawyers will no longer be exalted. This is in 1848. So for those who read Rich Dad, Poor Dad or the Cash Flow Quadrant, these were the employees. They're always afraid they're going to lose their job. So the smart guys were the S's, doctors, lawyers, accountants, and all this. And he says this in 1848, the capitalism was going to screw the S's.
Right.
And we screwed them via taxes.
Yeah, but I would argue that it wasn't free market capitalism that did that. It was the Fed, it was the central planners, ironically, that brought his predictions to fruition. He thought it would be the capitalists where it was actually the central planners, if you really get into the nitty-gritty. Who are Marxists. There you go. Yeah. So it all comes full circle.
And that's why George goes around with this, and the Fed, and he and Robert Barnes are suing the Fed, and Ron Paul says, and the Fed, because if you read, not this book, but some of Marx's later books, and it was actually Stalin and Lenin who said, the Federal Reserve Bank is a Marxist organization.
Yeah.
Just like Black Lives Matter is Marxist. Now, I have no problem with that. Be upfront about it.
Yeah.
But everybody thinks the Fed is federal. It's not. It's a cartel.
Yeah. Yeah. And what it does is through quantitative easing, through artificially low interest rates, and through bailing out these huge corporations, it takes capitalism and it completely perverts it. It distorts it. And that's why I always use the term free market capitalism, not just capitalism. Right. Because people like to argue and say, well, look at what happened during the GFC. That was a result of the global financial crisis. Right. That was a result of capitalism gone amok. And look, the Fed came in and bailed out all these corporations. That's what capitalism does. I said, no. That has nothing to do with capitalism.
Amen.
And that has nothing to do with a free market. So if you look at things in terms of a free market, which is really what capitalism is, that does not involve bailouts.
Correct.
That involves actually letting businesses go bust. That's right.
Yeah.
So then those people who are prudent can come in, buy the assets, and that benefits society at large moving forward.
Correct. They were too big to fail, which is communism.
Yeah.
And so that's why the Fed is the third central bank, but it's not really a central bank. It's a Marxist organization.
Yeah. And I would say it's not just communism, but it's kind of this blend of corporatism. And so when I hear the word corporatism, the first thing that comes to my mind is what we saw in 2020, and especially with the lockdowns.
You got it.
right? Because we basically told small and mid-sized businesses that you're no longer open for business.
Exactly.
You can't do, you're bust, basically.
And that's exactly what he's saying in this book.
Yeah, so that consolidates all of the demand to these huge mega corporations.
Correct.
So then is it easier, if you're someone, let's just say that's a Marxist, that's trying to control the means of production, is it easier to control the means of production when all goods and services are produced by 100 mega corporations or millions and millions and millions of small businesses?
Correct.
Obviously, those 100 mega corporations. So that would lead one to ask the question, well, was what we saw in 2020
the start of communism?
That's right. That's right.
So that's why he writes them. And Sarah wrote up some of the excerpts we're going to study tomorrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
So he says that there was, so my English teacher points out there was stage 1 and stage 2. So there was capitalism. Stage 1 was socialism.
Mm-hmm.
You see, they couldn't accept communism at first. So what Marx says, we have to put in socialism as stage 1. Stage 1. So that was Social Security. Everybody's now on Medicare, welfare, and all that. We're now a welfare nation.
Yeah.
So stage 1, which is socialism, completed. And my English instructor, this is in 1966, 65, he said sometime in the future, communism is going to step in. And communism is opposite of socialism. And so here I'm hanging in the sky in Vietnam going, holy mackerel, there it is. Because what happens is when communists take over from socialists, they murder the socialists. If you look at history, every time communists took over, the first people they kill are the intellectuals.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's about to start.
Yeah.